Hey TCS TV viewers, it's Dave and Evelyn from the camera store.
And today we're talking about the brand new A6700 from Sony.
Hi, drop.
All right, before we get into all the awesome features of the A6700, we have to give a shout out to our guys today who did some BMX biking here at Millennium Park. First of all, we had Carson Donovan, who we met at Beeline a while ago for our XT5 review.
Yeah.
And so he introduced us to Darcy, who's also amazingly talented, from DP Bikes. And we're gonna have the link to his YouTube channel below, as well as their crew, Bucky and Curtis.
Now they put on a show for us and they were fantastic because we'd be like, okay, I might have missed that shot, do it again. And they'd be like, oh, no problem, off we go, double, triple flips, here we go.
Yeah, or how close to the concrete can I get my head? These guys were awesome. But of course, let's get into some of the exciting features on this Sony A6700. So first of all, this is built around a cropped sensor. It's 26 megapixel backside illuminated with 5 stops of in-body image stabilization.
And it is packed with the latest that Sony has. Now we've seen updates on their full frame line of cameras quite a bit, and now we're starting to see it finally trickle down into the higher end crop sensors.
Yeah, it's almost like we're seeing features from the Sony A7R5 as well as the Sony ZV-E1, their full frame cameras, but of course in the smaller form factor at a much lower cost.
Now Sony has been adding a whole bunch of lenses to their whole ecosystem, plus there's a ton of third-party lenses available for the Sony E-mount.
Dave, I think you're gonna be as happy as I am that they've made a ton of refinements to this camera, and one of them I know you're happy about is the fully articulating screen.
Finally, a proper articulating screen for this camera. I love this kind of screen. It works fantastic. Plus, this one is actually a functioning touchscreen for Sony, which is somewhat unique because we don't get that as much with the previous generation of Sonys.
And including being able to operate the menu system. And they have put in the V2.0 menu system that we've seen in a lot of the newer cameras. It's a lot better organized than the previous A6600. We really like that. And then the feel of this camera is slightly different too. They've refined the grip ever so slightly, and they did add that front control dial.
I like having more control. You can shutter speed, aperture, and ISO all right at your fingertips rather than having to dig through a menu.
Yeah, and to make this kind of more of a better experience in terms of switching between photo and video, they added a switch so you can easily switch between modes, and they also put a more prominent record button. We did not like where they had the record button on the A6600. It was kind of like buried into the grip. We still have a custom control button there if you like that kind of thing. But the one thing though is we still don't have a joystick.
No, we don't have a joystick. No, I like the feel of the 6600, and it's nice to see Sony refining their cameras and listening to people and say, we want more control, we want a little bit better grip, and they're taking advantage of that.
In terms of power, we have a Z-type battery and the CP rating is 550 shots. However, we were pounding off a lot of shots, so we'll get into that a little bit later when we get into performance. And then we also have the one UHS-2 SD card slot.
So I'm a little surprised about that. I thought they might update that of dual memory card slots, but I am impressed that they did put USB-C connectivity to it. So now you can charge and power the camera through USB-C rather than their older micro USB.
Yeah, we also have a micro HDMI port and a headphone jack and a microphone jack, and so you can monitor as well as record some great audio with this camera. And then in terms of having an electronic viewfinder, yes, it still has an electronic viewfinder. It is still 2.36 million dots, so it's not amazing. However, I have to say, whenever you see people using this kind of camera, I think most of the time you're gonna see them using this touchscreen.
I mean, the fact that the viewfinder on this style of camera, it's a rangefinder style of camera, means the viewfinder is set off to the side rather than directly above the lens or the line of the lens. So I do find myself using the rear screen more on this style of camera than I do the viewfinder, but I'm glad they have it, especially on a bright sunny day like today.
And it's nice, of course, that this is all in a compact body. It's weather sealed for a little bit of dust and moisture resistant. So although we have like a bluebird sky today, it's nice that you can use this camera and feel confident if you're in a little bit of rain or something like that.
So the brand new A6700 features their newer 26 megapixel sensor. It is a crop sensor, but it has very good dynamic range, and you love the file sizes.
Yeah, I mean, I think 26 megapixels is a nice sweet spot. I mean, always going from a high resolution camera to something like 26 megapixels is just such a breeze to work through, especially when you're shooting a lot of action stuff. You can really sort of view and process your images quickly. But I also love that these have good dynamic range. They're nice to work with. We have a fast scanning sensor as well, so we didn't run into a lot of issues with like rolling shutter problems or having that like jello effect in your action photos.
Yeah, and speaking of action photos, I mean, the autofocus is a big factor in capturing these motion. And what we're finding is that this camera has fantastic autofocus. It has the same AI focus that the A7R5 has. Its ability to track motion is unbelievable.
Yeah, Sony's real-time tracking autofocus has, again, been refined. It has more profiles than ever in terms of what it's able to track and identify, and it's very cool how it operates. So it has a lot of machine learning built into it. Again, another tool that you can use to make sure that you have a lot of keepers. And Dave and I certainly found that we had a lot of keepers in this photo sequence of the guys doing their BMX thing. So it was hard to narrow it down of like which shots we love the most.
Yeah, you have a ton of keepers, and that's great. And like I said, that AI autofocus is something to really check out. I mean, it's tracking people. It's looking at 28 different elements of a person's body to track, which is great. So if you got somebody walking through a crowd or what have you, it just adds to that ability to track more accurately and get a higher success rate.
Yeah, now in terms of how fast we can shoot, this can shoot up to 11 frames per second, and that's in both mechanical as well as electronic.
Now, 11 frames per second sounds fast, and I think it used to be like the industry standard, and 10 frames a second was that magic number for years. However, I'm finding it a little bit on the slow side right now, personally, but I know you're okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't feel like I was missing any action shooting these guys ratting today. I mean, I think that there's this idea that you need to get up to like 30 frames per second, but that sometimes seems crazy. I certainly don't want to have to deal with all of the frames that come out of that when you're just like jamming on that shutter at 30 frames per second. So I personally have no issue with it being 11 frames per second. Because we knew it was going to be a bright sunny day in this kind of midday conditions, I told Dave we should definitely bring out some strobes so that we can have some fun and really enhance our creativity.
Now, I love working with strobes outside, but it's technically very challenging to overpower the sun, especially when there's a great distance involved. And these are 8600 strobes with 600 watts power each, and they were just able to light up the inside of that tube enough. But I had to use full power. I couldn't use high-speed sync because it would reduce my flash power. But I was shooting 1/60th of a second, and I got some pretty cool shots out of it.
Yeah, and can we just mention that we actually put the strobes on the bottom of the bowl, and these guys were like whipping past it. It was a little nerve-wracking, but you know, everything stayed safe. Everything was good.
These guys are pros. I had no problems. I said, "Are you gonna hit that there?" They said no, and they didn't. It was perfect.
All right, Dave, let's talk video.
Let's talk video. I mean, we already talked some of the physical features, the microphone jack and a headphone jack, and the much improved record button placement. It certainly adds to the usability of this camera as a video functionality.
So good. Plus the flippy screen, and the internals of this camera are fantastic. We have 4K 120 right to the memory card. You have full sensor readout 4K. You have little rolling shutter with that faster processor. There's definitely still some, but it's definitely helped to be a bit more controlled. Of course, we have that 5 stops of in-body image stabilization.
I love having all these little trick features into a camera. So in fact, we have the auto framing here, which is great. So if I'm a one-man show, I want to record something myself, but I want to explore the scene a little bit more, the camera's going to follow me around. It's a great feature to have when it comes to this.
And of course, if you're new to video, you have things like creative looks, and so you can adjust the color and tone of your video footage, so you don't have to do a lot in post. You do have S-Cinetone as well, real-time tracking with eye detection for shooting video as well, and so there's a lot of great technological advancements, and we're happy to see that they function really well, and again with that new processor, it's doing a great job. All of this is kind of built around the idea of making this a true hybrid camera. So as we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of physical things about the camera that would make it pair nicely. You can put it in a gimbal easy, it's very small.
Well, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the plug-and-play webcam utility functionality with this camera. Simply plug it in with the USB-C and this functions as a web camera. I mean, overall, this is a very potent video package for content creators, all in a very small, hand-holdable size.
Overall, Dave, I think this is a great hybrid package. I'm happy to see that Sony did come out with a better camera because, as we mentioned earlier on, they really have a great ecosystem, both with Sony lenses as well as third-party, making this just a great system for someone to get into.
There's certainly been a large part of the market has been wanting an updated A6600. Now we have it with the 6700 with its new and improved feature set.
Yeah, and I do think it is a worthy upgrade if you had one of the earlier A6000 series cameras. It finally checks a lot of boxes that I think people wanted in order to justify making that upgrade.
Yeah, I mean the slightly improved ergonomics, but the increased dials certainly add the functionality of it. That's what I like. It's much more tactile than the 6600 was.
Oh yeah, fully articulating screen, the new menu system. It just has a lot of different features that make the experience of working with this camera a lot better. Not to mention getting all those keeper shots with the awesome autofocus system. And of course the video functionality as well has been greatly improved.
Now, I am surprised they kept it at 11 frames per second. I thought for a current generation camera, we'd see much faster frames than that.
Yeah, we were kind of double checking it because usually in electronic, with a processor like this, you'd be able to go faster.
Now, maybe in firmware in the future, we're going to see it updated, but right now, we're limited to 11 frames per second.
And I just want to shout out again to the guys. We had Carson and Darcy from DP Bikes, the whole crew. They did such an awesome job here at Millennium Park, and it was a lot of fun.
We had a great time testing out this brand new 6700 from Sony and getting some really great results from it.
And of course, we want to know, what do you guys think of the Sony A6700? Does it check all your boxes? Are you thinking about getting one? Let us know in the comments below.
And am I making too big a deal out of the 11 frames per second? Make sure you follow us both on Instagram.
And if you're new to our channel, please subscribe, check out DP Bikes, and we'll catch you again very soon. Somewhere around here, we have a couple other guys.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Let's talk video. Because this camera has lots of great features though.
Hey, thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to check out more of our recent content, click up here. And if you're a Canadian, you want to support local, check out thecamerastore.com down here.